They're loud, they're scruffy, and they sure love to rock. On the hit list this time, we pay tribute to the grungier side of pop. After more than 2 decades with the Goo Goo Dolls, lead singer Johnny Rzeznik likens their relationship to a marriage.
Nobody else wants us, you know, so we have to stay together with each other. It's like, you know how hard it is to get a date after being married for 20 years? You're out of circulation for that long. It's kind of difficult, but...
Spending so long in each other's pockets, it's hardly surprising that they need a little time off.
You know, Mike made his own record, and Robbie works on his own stuff. I mess around with other things on the side, and, you know, we have an open marriage, I suppose, so I guess that helps to make it work.
Drummer Mike Malonen is a relative newcomer to the trio, but bassist Robbie Tapak goes all the way back to 1987, when he and Johnny founded the band under the name The Sex Maggots in Buffalo, New York. Incorporating heavy metal, pop rock and punk into their early albums, it took the Goo Goos 10 years to make it to the big time. In fact, Johnny claims he was plagued by writer's block and on the verge of leaving the band in 1997 when he was asked to write a song for the City of Angels soundtrack. The end result was the mega hit Iris, which spent 4 months atop the Billboard 100 airplay charts and turned Goo Goo Dolls into a household name. Legend has it that Johnny wrote the lyrics to Iris in 5 minutes and took only 1 hour to compose the music. The band has enjoyed continued chart success ever since, and Johnny has gone on to write more music for films, such as the 2007 blockbuster Transformers.
I was like, sure, you know, let me come down, and I got to see some of the film, not all of it. They're very secretive. And, you know, I read the script and, you know, asked a lot of questions about the characters and, you know, what they're thinking about, what's going on psychologically and the whole thing. And things like that.
He finds being part of a much bigger creative process inspiring.
You know, I like writing pieces of music that fit into a larger thing, which is this film. You know, it's really awesome. You know, it fits into a larger thing. It's a component that supports somebody else's vision. You know, I like that. You know, it's a good exercise as a writer to do that.
Florida rock band Matchbox 20 had been together 7 years when they decided to take a break to pursue solo interests. Since forming in Orlando in 1997, their 3 albums had given birth to more than 10 hit singles, and Rob Thomas had won 4 Grammy Awards for his collaboration with Carlos Santana on the smash hit Smooth. When the band reunited in 2007, minus Adam Gaynor on guitar, things had changed.
We had so many things inherent in this band that were different in this process. We had a new producer. We'd never worked with a different producer. We all wrote. We've never done that before. We all wrote all of these songs together. Paul has been our drummer for 11 years, and now he's our guitar player. And we're a 4-piece band instead of a 5-piece band.
As well as many of their biggest hits, Exile on Mainstream contains 6 new songs. This time, instead of leaving most of the songwriting to Rob, the whole band wrote as a team.
We'd create a musical, something that made us feel something musically, and then we'd wind up writing about like how that, you know, like if we hear this, it was a happy song, and like, oh, where does it go? And like somebody would come up with a line, and then that would be like, oh, that's what the song's about, and then we would all get together and like write the song about you know, the way that music made us feel.
The process taught them a thing or two about collaboration.
To be less precious about things, to have perspective on what's important and what's not important, and I think that really kind of allows like true creativity to come through.
Yeah, and letting your ego get out of the way, you know, and just let a good song come through. And we all trust each other enough now in our sensibility of what we think a good song is, that we don't, you know, it's not about your idea. It's not about, you know, you being the impetus for anything. It's just about what comes out of that.
Meanwhile, Rob spent much of 2008, in between touring with Matchbox, working on his solo album Cradle Song, hoping to follow up the success of his first solo effort, Something to Be, which shot to #1 on the Billboard 200. But mostly, he's just happy to be making music.
You know what? I was headed to prison. You know what I mean? Like, I was a bad egg. And it was a sympathetic music teacher who kind of saw me as a kid who was just didn't know what I wanted out of life, didn't know who I was, and kind of helped me move my way over to music.
Post-grunge outfit Nickelback came together in Alberta, Canada in 1996. Consisting of Chad Kroeger, his brothers Mike and Brandon, and lead guitarist Ryan Peake, Nickelback recorded 3 albums in the late 90s before signing a deal with EMI. Their 2001 album, Silver Side Up, produced the #1 smash How You Remind Me, which went on to become the Billboard Hot 100 Single of the Year and propelled Nickelback into the mainstream. A year later, Chad co-wrote and sang the song Hero for the Spider-Man soundtrack. The band followed up with the release of their 4th album, The Long Road, in 2003. But it wasn't until 2 years later that Nickelback really went nuclear. First came an injection of new energy with Daniel Adair taking over on drums. Although joining the band almost a decade after they formed was a daunting prospect.
It's a little intimidating coming into something so... They've been together for so long.
No, it wasn't.
It was at first, a little bit. I didn't act like it, of course. I was in control of the whole situation. But yeah, it was very easy. We're all hosers from Canada. We're all hosers. We all get along. I don't know. Do you know that terminology? You don't know hoser?
Hosers.
We like hockey. We like
Hosers.
most Canadian.
Like rednecks.
With Daniel in the lineup, the band released their 5th album, All the Right Reasons, which spawned 5 US Hot 100 singles, including the top 10 hits Photograph, Far Away and Rockstar. The incredible success of the album justified the band's decision to take their time in the studio, despite feeling the pressure from their record company.
You can't let the business side put you under a time crunch, you know. Creativity doesn't work that way. Some of the greatest albums took, what, 2 years to write?
Yeah.
A lot of the monumental
Rumors,
ones.
Fleetwood Mac took a year to record. And we're sitting in the studio after about 3 months going, a year? Huh. Who could sit in the studio for a year and record an album? You know, and at the 7-month mark, we're just ready to go nutty. So that was too long. That was too long to sit in a studio and record.
For Ryan, it all became worthwhile when they hit the stage.
You know, coming out every night and seeing a venue that sold out, and they had to keep opening up sections for more and more people to come in. I mean, there's no more satisfying feeling than that.
Although Jared Leto made an early name for himself as an actor, over the last few years, he's become much more well-known as the lead singer and songwriter for LA rock band 30 Seconds to Mars. He and his brother Shannon formed the band back in 1998. They have plenty of people interested in them nowadays, but it took them a while to gain traction.
We'd been recording music as well and writing music for a number of years, but we played it for some people and were promptly rejected time and time again. And I think about it, a couple of years after playing it for people, someone finally said, "Do you guys want to make a record?" And we very much wanted to make an album. So we did that, and that was in 1998 that happened. So it's actually almost been our 10-year anniversary as a signed band. Tomo's coming up on his 5th-year anniversary in the band.
Which is crazy.
He gets a Swatch watch.
Their self-titled debut album came out in 2002, and in 2005, the sophomore release, A Beautiful Lie, finally started racking up the awards.
It's been incredible. I mean, we're still kind of getting used to the way things are now as opposed to the way things were. I think that we still carry with us that feeling of the underdog.
In 2008, amid rumors of a rift with Virgin Records, the band took off on tour to Germany. And ahead of their big Berlin gig, Jared talked about the synergy between his careers in music and film.
For me, it's really normal and organic to make films, to make music, to direct music videos. They're just things that I do out of I think an interest and a passion to be involved in the process. And
he and the band are also passionate about reducing their carbon footprint and are committed to environmentally friendly touring.
I've actually decided to stop breathing because, we've all talked about this. The carbon dioxide that you give off is really dangerous. So if we could all hold our breath for at least 4.5, 5 minutes, we could do wonderful things.
Aaron Lewis, Mike Mushock, Johnny April and John Wysocki began covering songs by Korn, Pearl Jam and Tool over in Massachusetts in 1995. Stained got their big break when Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst, who's done a lot to promote the new breed of rock bands, heard them play and swung them a record deal. But his initial reaction to the band was not so favourable.
Well, it was actually the first time we ever met them. We had a chance to open up for them, and Aaron had given those guys a copy of we had done a CD ourselves, and Fred came to us about 20 minutes before we were supposed to play and kind of started going off on Aaron and myself and tried to have us thrown off the bill and threw the CD across the bar. Thought we were Satan worshippers. And we were able to play, and that's when he, watched the show and liked what we were doing.
Wow, that story's getting really scaled
Reader's
down.
Digest.
They couldn't quite believe their luck when Fred then decided to give them a leg up.
It was cool. Yeah.
It was cool, but we were still kind of, leery.
You're right.
Because, there's I'm gonna get you a record deal is like the biggest phrase in the business. And it doesn't always happen that way. And so, we were super excited on the way home, but at the same time we were kind of like, we'll see what happens.
Suddenly, Stained were on the road to becoming one of the original bands to launch the heavy guitar sound dubbed nu metal. Their first trip to the UK was a huge success. To their surprise, the moshing crowds knew all the words to their songs.
It was incredible. None of us expected that, especially never having played here. It was, blew me away. Same thing in the States. I never expected it to do that in the States either.
3 albums and 4 tours later, they were being compared with grunge originators Nirvana.
Musically, I don't think we sound anything like Nirvana. I know that Nirvana was kind of anti everything that's going on, kind of like we are, where we don't really care all that much about all the limelight and all that stuff. In that sense, we're kind of, I guess you could say we're kind of like Nirvana, but that would be about as...
And that's reaching.
Yeah, that's reaching.
Fast forward another 3 years and 6 albums, and the bad boys of nu metal were being welcomed as the new ambassadors of rock, giving up their time and talents to raise money for VH1's Save the Music Foundation.
And it's just a good thing to be a part of.
After Kurt Cobain was found dead from a shotgun wound to the head at his home in Seattle in 1994, Nirvana drummer Dave Grohl contemplated taking up a job offer to play with Heartland rock group Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Instead, he decided to go into the studio and record 12 of the 40 songs he'd quietly been writing since joining Nirvana back in 1990. He completed the demo in 5 days under the name of the Foo Fighters. And when the music industry started to take interest, he needed to form a band to support the album. When asked why he'd hidden his light under a bushel for so long, Dave confessed that he'd been so in awe of Kurt's talent that he thought it best to keep his songs to himself. Obsessed with perfection, Dave took the rough mixes of their second album, The Colour and the Shape, with him to LA, and ended up replaying many of the drum parts himself, without telling the band's drummer, William Goldsmith. William promptly left the band, making way for Taylor Hawkins, who, along with Pat Smear and France Stahl, has been with them ever since. 10 years later, announcing the nominees for the 2007 Grammy Awards, the chemistry between Dave and Taylor was still coming through loud and clear.
Here we go. For Best New Artist, the nominees are Feist.
What is that?
I think that's
Lettucey.
Lettucey. What? They're so new that we just don't know.
That one hasn't even come out yet.
Yeah, this is, you wait till you hear it, it's great.
Paramore.
Taylor Swift.
After winning 7 Grammy Awards themselves, they found the excitement of first-time nominee Taylor Swift infectious.
You know, I think everybody feels like Taylor Swift. They just don't want to jump up there and go,
If you get green, or if you get jaded and unexcited about anything, about actually getting to do any of this kind of thing, then you should quit.
After 6 albums and hundreds of concerts, they might not have become jaded, but perhaps they were feeling a little out of touch with the kids.
So, and I'm not really sure how we relate to the 12 or 13-year-old girls anymore, because we're kind of like an old man's rock band.
The Nirvana frontman's tragic suicide at the age of 27 sent shockwaves of grief flooding through the disenfranchised youth of the 90s, who'd looked to Kurt Cobain as their chief spokesman. But few would have felt the devastating effect of his passing more keenly than his 30-year-old widow, Courtney Love. Kurt's death on the 8th of April came just 4 days before the release of her band Hole's debut album. The aptly titled Live Through This, which featured Kurt singing backing vocals on some of the tracks, was voted Best Album in Rolling Stone's 1995 Critics Poll. Despite her obvious problems and addictions, she produced some of her best work over the next few years. 1998 saw the release of Hole's celebrated third album, Celebrity Skin. She also received a Golden Globe nomination for her role in the Milos Forman film, The People vs. Larry Flynt. But by the end of the decade, the band had started to disintegrate, and her film career was going nowhere. She took another stab at forming a punk rock femme supergroup, which disbanded in 2002 amid arguments with Universal Music. In October 2003, Courtney was arrested in LA while smashing windows to get into the home of her boyfriend, manager and producer Jim Barber. The police charged her with being in possession of prescription painkillers, and just 4 hours after her release on bail, she was rushed to a hospital to be treated for an overdose. Meanwhile, her debut solo album, America's Sweetheart, flopped, and Rolling Stone magazine declared, "For people who enjoy watching celebrities fall apart, America's Sweetheart should be more fun than an Osbourne's marathon." Courtney herself confided to the same magazine that she needed to be saved. Tens of messy court appearances and orders to get clean later, she decided to put the record straight and launched her own book in 2006.
I'd been written about so many times and had so many articles written about me that this was something where I could present, fractured parts of myself, but myself, and there's no editor saying, putting me in a box and making me into something I'm not. This is me, like it or not.
The same year, Britain's Channel 4 broadcast a documentary called The Return of Courtney Love. But as yet, there's been no talk of a return to the recording studio. The 2004 documentary, Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, revealed more than a little tension amongst the ranks of one of the world's biggest rock acts, particularly between drummer Lars Ulrich and singer James Hetfield.
When you keep resentments in for so long, you're carrying this heavy baggage around for years. The other person has long forgotten, but you've held it in and just built up a huge story about it. And it's so good to let all that insanity out,
Poor guitarist Kirk Hammett had grown tired of being in the middle.
Well, I must say, I've always been the buffer between Lars and James, ever since the very beginning when I first joined the band. It's just that this movie is the first time that cameras actually caught me in that position.
The documentary, originally intended to follow the making of the LA band's 8th studio album, Saint Anger, changed direction when guitarist Jason Newsted walked out and left the 3 remaining members to confront their demons and each other. The film ended up documenting their journey through group therapy.
Going to therapy on its own is tough enough. Why did we do it? I don't know. Metallica are up for challenges. I think it was a good, excellent mirror to see ourselves in. And once we started, we couldn't stop, you know? And I think the more the cameras were there, the more we became real with each other, and the more it became like a truth serum.
Doing their dirty laundry on camera must have worked. 3 years later, the band that had been on the brink of breaking up were in Berlin for the release of their new album, Death Magnetic.
We came close to death, I would say. Not literally, but for Metallica, Metallica's our life. And to come close to breaking up, we felt that there was life after death. And I kind of ran with that subject.
By early 2009, looking solid as a rock in their resurrection, they were celebrating their invitation to headline the Sonosphere Festival and their upcoming induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Life is good in Metallica right now. A lot of good things are happening, quite opposite of what they were around the St. Anger time. So all the work and effort that we put into our relationship back then has brought a lot of fruits of labor with that on this album. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Grammys, so we're feeling good.
If any rock band fits the hard-drinking, drug-taking, hotel-wrecking stereotype, it has to be Motley Crue. In the early 80s, they unashamedly courted notoriety with a series of blatant publicity stunts, such as staging bomb threats, carrying porn onto airplanes, and throwing a television set out of the Sheraton Hotel in Edmonton. A fatal car crash involving singer Vince Neil and Nikki Sixx's near-fatal overdose all contributed to the legends building up around them. But it wasn't until they sobered up in 1989 that they had their one and only #1 album, Dr. Feelgood. Throughout the wilderness years of the 90s, bad boy drummer Tommy Lee kept himself in the headlines with his on and off again relationship with Baywatch babe Pamela Anderson. But in 2004, the Crue were ready to jump on the rock reunion gravy train for a new compilation album called Red, White and Crue. 2 years later, they were going legit with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
I was noticing that we have the Erotic Museum in Fredericks right here, so I think this is a perfect place for the star. What do you guys think?
Hanging around downtown LA brought back memories of the good old, bad old days.
You just freaked me out. You just reminded me about us driving around in my van with a staple gun, putting up posters on every freaking telephone pole.
Streets all these poor palm trees have staple marks in it from us.
Yeah. Wow. Flashback.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Having survived all that hard living and racking up sales of more than 80 million albums worldwide, they were entitled to get a bit sentimental. But far from putting their feet up and reminiscing, the Crue have been looking to the future with the staging of their annual touring festival, Crewfest, for serious rockers of all ages.
For some reason, people like to take bands and go, all bands from that era should tour together, and I think it's the smarter acts that go, no, we should tour with all bands from any era that are great rock bands.